puts the two-state solution at great risk, especially given the rhetoric from some Israeli government officials. Guyana calls on this Council to act now for Gaza and for the future of both Palestine and Israel. A peaceful and stable Israel depends on a peaceful and stable Palestine. The two are not mutually exclusive. And a peaceful Palestine and Israel is crucial for lasting peace and stability of the Middle East region. I thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Madam President, we thank you and your friendly country, Guyana, for your leadership of the Security Council. We thank Algeria for all its efforts and its statement that my brother Ammar delivered a few minutes ago in bringing forth the draft resolution on behalf of the Arab group that has just been voted regarding the grave situation that continues to be faced by the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip as Israel, the occupying power, carries on with its genocidal war. We also thank the 13 members of the Security Council who voted in favor of the draft, and we thank you also for your intense engagement with the Arab group led by our brother, the Ambassador of Algeria, during the course of the last 3 weeks, negotiating in good faith, of trying to save the Palestinian people's lives in the Gaza Strip and not to allow the looming catastrophe flying over our heads in having a further catastrophe on the Gaza Strip. We sincerely thank you for that effort, for your principled position, and for your determination that a ceasefire has to be demanded, implemented now to save lives, to save the Gaza Strip, to save the 1.5 million Palestinians in the Rafah district. This draft resolution was brought to the Council precisely because Israel persists with the onslaught, persists with every single grave breach it has been committing, despite the near unanimous calls by the international community for a ceasefire, and despite the ICJ provisional measures ordered to Israel to cease all acts of genocide and incitement to genocide, and to ensure humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, who every day are facing death and destruction and the torment of starvation and repeated forced displacement. It has been nearly 3 weeks since I last addressed the Council following the Court's order appealing for action to be taken to ensure the implementation of the provisional measures, to ensure a ceasefire that would protect the Palestinian people and avert the further ravaging of their lives by the Israeli onslaught. But our appeals have regrettably been to no avail. Between our last Council session on the 31st of January and today, the casualty toll has risen from 26,000 Palestinians killed by the Israeli occupying forces to now almost 30,000 people killed and more than 69,000 people injured. This means that in just the past 20 days alone, Israel has killed nearly 4,000 more Palestinian children, women, and men in just 20 days. This is deplorable consequence of inaction. It means more than 200 Palestinians killed every day. It means that by the time this Security Council session ends, more than 25 Palestinians will have been killed. It means more babies will be murdered, wounded, amputated, and orphaned. More children will die of hunger and hypothermia and disease. It means the continued threat of the further forced displacement of families, the looming danger of a mass expulsion or worse, slaughter of the nearly 1.5 million people in Rafah who have nowhere to flee, no protection whatsoever. It means the continued deprivation of the entire population of Gaza, left without food, water, medicine, and shelter, essential to alleviate suffering and ensure survival. It means that the human lives that could have been spared and saved are instead being forsaken to Israel's genocidal war machine, deliberately, knowingly, by those who oppose a ceasefire. We all know this. We know the staggering figures. We have heard the warning from the Secretary General, the heads of all UN agencies on the ground, dozens of independent special rapporteurs and humanitarian and human rights agencies the world over. We have seen it with our own eyes in pictures and videos that have seared and stained our collective conscience and broken our hearts and our humanity. In the face of Israel's brazen violation of the ICJ order, the court sent another warning, issued another decision on 16 February, reminding Israel that it is bound to fully comply with its obligations under the Genocide Convention and all the provisional measures ordered by the court on 26 January. The court also had to remind Israel that its obligations are immediate and should be effective. The call for ceasefire should have been agreed to long time ago. What threshold needs to be crossed for this Council to finally demand a ceasefire? What could be more serious than the crime than genocide? History, as my brother Ammar said, is going to judge the Council harshly. It is already doing so, impairing its credibility and authority in the eyes of people all over the world, perhaps irreparably. But we will not be complacent in this inaction. We have a duty to our people to seek every possible pathway to bring an end to the slaughter, an end to the trauma and terror, an end to the threats to expel them from their land. We will not be silent, and we will act with every legitimate means to uphold our sacred obligations to defend and protect our people and to pursue justice for them. That is why we have come back to the Security Council over and over again, imploring it to act to protect our people. That is why we will not relent in seeking accountability, calling on the Council, the General Assembly, and all states to act in line with the Charter and all obligations under international law without selectivity, without exception. We will not stop demanding accountability for the war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, that Israel is perpetrating against the Palestinian people. But accountability must move beyond words in these chambers. It must mean real consequences for the occupying power for its criminal behavior. To this end, I just have returned around midnight last night from The Hague, where the State of Palestine stood before the ICJ, appealing to the Court for Justice after more than 75 years of Nakba, 56 years of belligerent occupation, 17 years of blockade, and nearly 140 days of vindictive, punitive siege and massacres perpetrated by Israel in Gaza, which is a genocide. What crimes has Israel not committed yet? We have gone to the court along with an unprecedented number of countries to confront the Israeli impunity that has made life a living hell for the Palestinian people, appealing for an immediate and complete end to this illegal colonial occupation and apartheid regime, the root cause of all the ills our people are suffering, including this genocidal war. The court has undertaken its solemn duties, acting swiftly both in response to the case brought by South Africa against Israel under the Genocide Convention and in response to the General Assembly's request for advisory opinion, which we hope will be a true turning point in the quest for accountability and for justice for the Palestinian people. When will the Security Council finally undertake its solemn duties? When will the Council act to demand the ceasefire that has been demanded by the rest of the international community majority for months now? The veto of this draft resolution is not only regrettable after weeks of consultations with every single Council member, and after endless patience by the State of Palestine, the Arab states, and nearly the entire international community that for months have demanded a ceasefire. It is absolutely reckless and dangerous against shielding Israel even as it commits the most shocking crimes while exposing millions of innocent Palestinian civilians to its wrath and more untold horrors. It is not Israel that should be protected by the veto. It is Palestinian children, women, and men who must be protected by this Council acting now. Only with a ceasefire can we give a chance for life, for Resolution 2712 and 2720 to be implemented, as the President of the Security Council has indicated correctly. Ceasefire would allow these two resolutions to be implemented for humanitarian assistance to reach the millions of desperate people in need, for UNRWA and other UN agencies to deliver life-saving aid, and a chance for our collective efforts to chart a path for justice and peace. And as long as the Council fails to demand a ceasefire, it will be considered not only derelict in its duties, but an enabler of the most horrific crimes we are witnessing in these days in Gaza. The message given today to Israel with this veto is that it can continue to get away with murder. Israel cannot and should not and will not get away with it. We will not allow it. This veto does not absolve Israel of its obligations, nor of those who shield it. Not here in the Security Council, not in the ICJ, and not anywhere. Even if the Security Council continues to shirk its responsibilities, to be obstructed by the veto of a permanent member over and over, the other organs of the international system are upholding their responsibilities And one day or another, Palestinian children will not be viewed as a demography threat, but as children with a right to life and to fulfill their hopes and dreams. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. Since October 7th, this Council has voted upon numerous resolutions constructed around the same flawed theme, the concept of a ceasefire. This word is constantly mentioned in the Security Council, in the General Assembly, and by UN officials and agencies, as if it is a silver bullet, a magical solution to all of the region's problems. For the past 137 days, the only solution discussed on the international stage is this absurd notion of a ceasefire. Will a ceasefire bring home the hostages? Will a ceasefire eliminate Hamas? Will a ceasefire disarm Hezbollah, the Houthis, and all the other Iranian terrorist proxies in our region? Will a ceasefire end the genocidal ambitions of Palestinian terror groups aiming for Israel's annihilation? We're still waiting for President Abbas to condemn the October 7th massacre. What exactly will this silver bullet ceasefire achieve? A ceasefire achieves one thing and one thing only: the survival of Hamas. Exactly the opposite of how it's portrayed. A ceasefire is a death sentence for many more Israelis and Gazans. Supporting a ceasefire means supporting the survival of jihadist terrorists that will continue butchering Israelis and endlessly spilling the blood of innocents. There is a reason, dear colleagues, that the ICJ unanimously and rightly rejected South Africa's attempt to undermine Israel's right to defend itself by calling for a ceasefire. The very idea that Israel would be denied this fundamental right while Hamas would be free to continue its terror and hold hostages is morally unthinkable, because as you know, Hamas is not going to even read your resolutions. So why are some on this council so determined to impose harmful measures that the ICJ refused to take? You all know the answers. Colleagues, a ceasefire is the epitome of a kick-the-can-down-the-road policy. A ceasefire today means immunity for baby killers and rapists. It's an easy way to make this problem an issue for another day. With a ceasefire in place, Hamas will regroup, rearm, and their next attempted genocide against Israelis will only be a question of when, not if. Hamas has sworn publicly to commit the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again until Israel is annihilated. So why is the Council, charged with security, is so fixated on aiding these monsters to stay in power? Just yesterday, Israel exposed footage proving that Shiri Bibas and her two children, 4-year-old Ariel and 1-year-old Kfir, were taken to Gaza alive. So tell me, distinguished council members, a 4-year-old and a baby were taken hostage by Hamas, among others, and most of you choose to support a ceasefire? Why do you want to leave them in Gaza? Do you not see how immoral that is? And what kind of precedent this would set for terrorists around the globe? Did you think about baby Kfir when you voted on this resolution? A resolution that would ensure that Kfir, along with 133 other hostages, remain in dark terror tunnels? Did you think about Noa Argamani? Noa's look of sheer horror as she violently separated from her boyfriend Avinoam Or and taken to Gaza on the back of a motorbike has become a symbol of the hostages' plight. In the heart-wrenching video, you can hear Noah screaming and pleading with the terrorists not to abduct her. Noah's mother, Liora, born Chong Hong Lee, a Chinese Israeli citizen originally from Wuhan, is terminally ill with stage 4 brain cancer. All she asks is that she can hug Noah, her only daughter, one last time before she succumbs to her illness. To my Chinese colleague, I ask you, in the name of Liora Chong Hong Lee, rather than pushing for a harmful ceasefire which will keep Noah in Gaza, I urge you, pressure Hamas to release Noah so that her mother can see Noah one last time before her death. Colleagues, jihadists around the globe see that the body mandated to uphold international security is willing to allow murderous Hamas rapists to continue their reign of terror. Your calls for a ceasefire empower Hamas, giving them hope to stay in power. This does not ensure security, it prevents it. You truly want a ceasefire? Well, Israel also wants a ceasefire. Your children are not the ones that are falling in battle against bloodthirsty terrorists. They are ours. If Hamas survives, it will be our children that Hamas will murder in cold blood again. Israel seeks a ceasefire, but there is only one formula that we are willing to accept. All of our hostages must be released, and Hamas must turn themselves in. Colleagues, the Algerian resolution not only empowers jihadists by calling for a ceasefire, it also fails, again, to condemn Hamas for their heinous crimes. Not condemning Hamas's atrocities has now become a tradition here. It's tragic. Hamas Nazis invaded Israel, deliberately murdering families, raping women and girls, and destroying everything they could get their hands on. They are brutal terrorists who took pride in their barbarism. Yet, not once, not even once, since October 7th, has this Council or any UN body condemned Hamas and their violence. One day, we mentioned history here, when historians studied the reasons why the UN lost its standing and influence, the inability of this organization to condemn terrorists that slaughter children will be one of the driving factors. Mark my words. But the impact of this Council's decisions spread much further than this room. If this Council is incapable of condemning Hamas, UN officials feel like they have further legitimacy to whitewash Hamas. Mere days ago, Under-Secretary General Griffith stated that Hamas is not a terrorist group, but a political movement. Is the intentional, brutal murder of hundreds of civilians not terror? Is the systematic rape of women not terror? Is beheading and burning children alive not terror? We all know Hamas is a terrorist organization, yet by staying silent in the face of Hamas's crimes and not condemning them, you allow such lies to perpetuate. Your politicized decision of silence promotes the falsehoods that Hamas can be reasoned with, that they are not the bloodthirsty terrorists that they are, and this is the stance that the UN adopts and promotes. Condemn Hamas as a council, condemn their atrocities, rid this institution of its shame. Do it for the sake of those butchered, for the sake of the hostages, for the sake of morality and truth. It's in your hands. Colleagues, some of you have approached me and asked me why Israel is so critical of the UN and its agencies. The recent event over the past weeks have hopefully made it clearer to you. 1 week ago, Special Rapporteur Albanese libelously stated that the victims of October 7th were not murdered for their identity, but in response to Israel's so-called oppression. This is victim blaming and a clear justification of terror. But for some UN employees, even poisonous words are not enough. Dozens of UNRWA employees took active roles in the October 7th massacre, while many more praised the savage attack. Faisal Ali Musallem el-Naami, an UNRWA social worker, stuffed the body of Jonathan Samerano into a truck to be taken to Gaza. A Hamas data center was located directly underneath UNRWA headquarters in Gaza, connected to UNRWA's power supply, and terror tunnels have been found running underneath various UNRWA facilities, schools, everything. Out of UNRWA's 1,300 employees in Gaza, 12%, I repeat, 12% are members of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and at least 236 of them are active terrorists in these organizations' armed gangs. UNRWA has been proven to be an instrumental part of Hamas's terror machine, which makes UNRWA itself a terrorist organization. Yet, rather than take responsibility for the weaponization of this murderous UN agency, Commissioner General Lazzarini has chosen to say that he had no knowledge of Hamas's hold on his own agency. This is blatantly false. Israel exposed terror tunnels under UNRWA schools and supplied evidence of Hamas's exploitation of UNRWA. You can see it in my Twitter account. I personally sent letters to the Commissioner General and the Secretary General. We implored them for years to carry out a comprehensive search of all UNRWA facilities in Gaza. Yet not only did they refuse, they chose to bury their heads in the sand and ignore the reality. This is why every report, every statement or number provided by the UN cannot be trusted. In Gaza, dear colleagues, Hamas is the UN and the UN is Hamas. Distinguished Council members, this ostrich tactic, burying one's head in the sand, is the modus operandi among UN leadership. Yet, no matter how deep one's head is buried, it will not change the reality on the ground. A terrorist is a terrorist. A terror organization is a terror organization. And a law-abiding liberal democracy will remain as such. Even if here at the UN, for political reasons, light becomes darkness and day becomes night. This is also the case with the escalating situation on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. For years, and you heard it here, for years Israel has called for this Council to impose the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701. Yet, for years, the UN has opted for the ostrich tactic. Tragically, this is no longer a situation that can be ignored. The clock is ticking. It is not a matter of years, but weeks before Israel will be forced to implement Resolution 1701 ourselves. Just yesterday, a Hezbollah drone was downed while flying over the Sea of Galilee, deep inside Israel. Over 2,000 Hezbollah missiles and rockets have rained down on the cities of Israel's north. 2,000. And nearly 100,000 residents of northern Israel have been displaced due to the threat posed by Hezbollah, with, of course, Iran's backing. A ceasefire in Gaza is not only destructive for Israel and the Palestinians, it also ensures that a blind eye is turned to what is unfolding in the rest of the region. Be it the Houthis' relentless attacks on maritime trade, pro-Iran militias targeting even American service members, or Hezbollah's constant bombardment of Israel's north. The clock is ticking, and sadly, we will be forced to take decisive action. Terror will never be tolerated. Madam President, this Council must put politics aside for the sake of its mandate. A ceasefire that allows Hamas to remain in power means ensured death and destruction. Ignoring Hamas's atrocities and not condemning them means empowering terrorists worldwide. And focusing only on Gaza while looking away from the terror aggression across the region will lead to a future that none of us seek. The Security Council must fulfill its mandate. it must side with Israel against the forces of evil, and it must face reality. Reality is not found when one's head is buried in the sand. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel for his statement. I shall now give the floor to the representative of Qatar.
شكرا لكم السيد الرئيس. أود أن أهنئ بلدكم الصديق على رئاسة المجلس، ويسرني أن أدلي بهذا البيان باسم دول مجلس التعاون لدول الخليج العربية، وهي بلادي دولة قطر والمملكة العربية السعودية ودولة الكويت ودولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة وسلطنة عمان ومملكة البحرين، وننضم للبيان الذي ستدلي به المجموعة العربية بعد قليل. السيد الرئيس، ينعقد اجتماعنا اليوم في ظل ظروف بالغة الخطورة، حيث تحول الوضع في قطاع غزة إلى أسوأ كارثة إنسانية يشهدها العالم. فبحسب التقارير الأممية ليس في قطاع غزة مكان آمن، وأصبح تقريبا كل سكانه الذي يتجاوز عددهم مليوني شخص من النازحين والمعارضين. إن دول مجلس التعاون لدول الخليج العربية في ظل اقتراب عدوان احتلال الإسرائيلي ضد الأشقاء الفلسطينيين في قطاع غزة من الشهر الخامس، تحذر وبشدة من ازدياد وتيرة الهجمات العسكرية
ongoing for 5 months. The GCC has cautioned against the increased frequency of military attacks against our Palestinian brothers. We caution against the increased number of victims, the majority of whom are women and children who have been killed, wounded, and people under rubble. We call on the United Nations to assume responsibility. The UN officials have said that they've never seen a situation such as that taking place today. The UN Secretary General invoked Article 99 of the Charter, warned about the dangers of the collapse of the humanitarian system and of public order in Gaza. He also called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. There's a need to fully implement the resolutions 2720 and 2712 of the Security Council dating 2022. Madam President, the Arab states of the Gulf Cooperation Council condemn in the firmest terms the Israeli threat regarding the launch of a military operation against the city of Rafah. In the city of Gaza, we caution against the fact that these threats portend an increase in the violence levels and destabilization. These threats represent a danger to regional stability. We firmly condemn the attempts at forced displacement of civilians, and we firmly reject any military engagement in the city of Rafah. We caution against the new humanitarian disaster in that area. This is the last refuge for hundreds of thousands of displaced persons in the Gaza Strip.
حيال تعليق بعض الدول المانحة تمويل هلوكات الأنروا، وخاصة في ظل الأوضاع الإنسانية الخطيرة الراهنة، حيث يعتمد على الوكالة 5 ملايين من الفلسطينيين لا سيما في قطاع غزة. وفي هذا الصدد نضم صوتنا للأمين العام في مناشدة جهود الدول التي علقت دعمها للأنروا بمراجعة قراراتها واستئناف تمويلها للوكالة، وذلك حتى لا تتعمق الكارثة الإنسانية الحالية في غزة أكثر مما هي عليه، وتجدد دولنا موقفها الثابت من عدالة القضية الفلسطينية
Our countries reiterate their steadfast position in support of the just Palestinian cause and the legitimate rights of the fraternal people to establish an independent state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the capital. Madam President, Arab states of the GCC extend their appreciation for the ongoing negotiations around a framework agreement for a new humanitarian truce in Gaza. My country, the state of Qatar, has been facilitating these efforts alongside the Arab Republic of Egypt and the U.S. to free hostages and detainees, to guarantee greater deliveries of humanitarian assistance, and to rescue efforts in Gaza to protect civilians. The Arab states of the GCC have profound regrets regarding the failure of the Council to adopt the draft resolution submitted by Algeria. This was supported by the Arab group and the overwhelming majority of members of the Council. This draft is humanitarian by its content and aligns with IHL. We wish to emphasize in this regard that our country will continue efforts alongside partners at all levels to guarantee the achievement of an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Let us end the bloodletting of the Palestinian people, and let us deliver adequate volumes of humanitarian assistance and relief to Gaza, and let us protect civilians. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the representative of Qatar for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Tunisia.
شكرا السيدة الرئيسة.
Thank you, Madam President.
أتشرف بإلقاء هذا البيان باسم المجموعة العربية، وأود في البداية أن أهنئكم وبلدكم غيانا على تولي رئاسة المجلس لهذا الشهر، وأعرب لكم عن الشكر لعقد هذه الجلسة. ونتقدم بالشكر إلى الجزائر العضو العربي في المجلس على مبادرتها بتقديم مشروع القرار ومساعيها طوال مسار المفاوضات من أجل الحفاظ على وحدة المجلس والتوصل إلى توافق حول مطلب وقف إطلاق النار الفوري لأسباب إنسانية لا تخطئها العين، وباعتباره الإجراء الأكثر إلحاحا في ظل الأوضاع الكارثية التي تردى فيها قطاع غزة والمعاناة الإنسانية الرهيبة للسكان الفلسطينيين نتيجة مواصلة سلطات الاحتلال لعدوانها وجرائم الحرب والإبادة الجماعية التي تقترفها في حق الشعب الفلسطيني بلا هوادر، علاوة على إمعانها في إجراءات العقاب الجماعي ومنع المساعدات الإنسانية والطبية والغذاء والماء والوقود وكل وسائل الحياة. السيد الرئيس، تتوجه المجموعة العربية بالشكر للدول الأعضاء في مجلس الأمن التي ساهمت بكل إيجابية وبشكل بناء في مسار المفاوضات بخصوص مشروع القرار وصوتت لفائدته، وبقدر ما تعرب عن أسفها لفشل المجلس في اعتماد مشروع القرار وعجزه مرة أخرى عن الاضطلاع بمسؤوليته القانونية والأخلاقية باعتباره الجهاز الرئيسي المسؤول عن حفظ الأمن والسلم الدوليين، فإنها تجدد تأكيد تمسكها كما العديد من دول العالم وأعضاء مجلس الأمن والمنظمات الإنسانية والأممية بضرورة إقرار وقف فوري لإطلاق النار ومنع تنفيذ سلطات الاحتلال لمخططها الذي يستهدف أكثر من 1.5 مليون فلسطيني في رفح، ومنع تكرار جرائم التهجير القسري للفلسطينيين وإفراغ الأرض الفلسطينية من سكانها. وتعتبر المجموعة العربية أنه من غير المقبول بكل المقاييس أن يظل مجلس الأمن مرتهنا للحسابات السياسية والمصالح الضيقة في حين تتواصل الاعتداءات اليومية على الشعب الفلسطيني وتتعمق معاناته ويفقد الآلاف من أبنائه بمن فيهم الأطفال وكبار السن والنساء والمرضى. إن عجز مجلس الأمن اليوم عن التكلم بصوت واحد وإعلاء وإعلاء القانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني والحق في الحياة يوجه مرة أخرى الرسالة الخاطئة للقوة القائمة بالاحتلال ويطلق يدها لتواصل جرائمها واستهتارها بالشرعية الدولية واعتبار نفسها فوق القانون والمساءلة، كما يعمق أزمة الثقة في مصداقية هذا الجهاز الأممي الهام. وفي هذا السياق تجدد المجموعة العربية رفضها لسياسات الانحياز لمخططات سلطات الاحتلال وتوفير الحماية لها على حساب أرواح الآلاف من الفلسطينيين التي تزهق وأرضه التي تسرق عن طريق مخططات التهجير والاستيطان. وتؤكد المجموعة العربية رفضها لازدواجية المعايير التي ساهمت في إطالة أمد القضية الفلسطينية وفي عدم تنفيذ أي من القرارات الخاصة بها بكل ما رافق ذلك من مجازر وتنكيل في حق الشعب الفلسطيني وانتهاكات لحقوقه، وهي تطالب بالتعاطي مع كل القضايا والوضعيات بنفس المقاييس ودرجة الالتزام. كما تطالب المجموعة العربية المجتمع الدولي ومجلس الأمن بضمان توفير الحماية للفلسطينيين وتسريع دخول وإيصال المساعدات الإنسانية دون إعاقة إلى قطاع غزة، تنفيذا لقراري مجلس الأمن 2712 و 2720. كما تؤكد على دعمها الكامل لجهود كبيرة منسق الأمم المتحدة للشؤون الإنسانية وإعادة الإعمار في غزة سيغريد كاد ومساعيها للاستجابة للحالة الإنسانية الكارثية التي يشهدها القطاع. السيد الرئيس، إن الجهود الجارية للتوصل إلى اتفاق إطار لتبادل الأسرى والمحتجزين وإقرار هدنة لا تتعارض مع مطلب الوقف الفوري لإطلاق النار الذي لا يمكن إلا أن يساعد على تسهيل مثل هذه المساعي، ولا تفسير للإصرار على رفض اعتماد مشروع القرار الخاص بهذا المطلب وتمكين المجموعة الدولية ومجلس الأمن من التكلم بصوت واحد إلا سعي حكومة الاحتلال لمواصلة عملياتها العسكرية وتنفيذ مخططها الرامي إلى تهجير الفلسطينيين من أرضهم. ومن هذا المنطلق وإزاء هذا التوجه الذي يهدف إلى تحييد مجلس الأمن ومنعه من تحمل مسؤولياته التي يقرها ميثاق الأمم المتحدة في مثل هذه الأوضاع الكارثية. فإننا نتساءل عن محددات دور المجلس، ومتى سيسمح له بالقيام بهذا الدور المفترض، وكم من روح بريئة يجب أن تزهق قبل أن يتحقق ذلك. ألا يكفي قتل أكثر من 28,000 وجرح حوالي 70,000 وتهجير أكثر من 1.3 مليون وتدمير كل البنى التحتية والمساكن والمستشفيات والمدارس ودور العبادة وكاتب الأمم المتحدة وقتل العشرات من موظفي الوكالات الأممية والإنسانية والصحفيين؟ السيد الرئيس، كذلك تدين المجموعة العربية بأشد العبارات اعتداءات السلطة القائمة بالاحتلال المتكررة على أراضي كل من سوريا ولبنان وخرقها لسيادتهما وقتلها للمدنيين الأبرياء، وهو ما يقوض الأمن والسلم والاستقرار في المنطقة والعالم. ستواصل المجموعة العربية تحركاتها على جميع المستويات وفي كافة المحافل لتتحمل المجموعة الدولية مسؤوليتها بعيدا عن الانتقائية والحسابات السياسية، ولتفرض على سلطات الاحتلال احترام القانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني وتضع حدا لمخططاتها وانتهاكاتها الجسيمة بحق الشعب الفلسطيني. شكرا.
of the rights of the Palestinian people. Thank you, Madam President.
Of Tunisia for his statement. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Egypt to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. I now give the floor to the representative of Egypt.
شكرا السيدة الرئيسة. السادة الأعضاء، لقد شهدنا صباح اليوم مجددا نموذجا صارخا من ازدواج المعايير. وقد عاقب الوفد الأمريكي للمرة الثالثة محاولة استصدار قرار من مجلس الأمن لإيقاف وقف إطلاق النار في غزة، رغم تصويت 13 عضوا من مجلس الأمن لصالح مشروع القرار الجزائري المقدم بدعم كامل من المجموعتين العربية والإسلامية في الأمم المتحدة.
by the Arab and Islamic groups in the United Nations.
للجزائر العضو العربي بمجلس الأمن على تقديم القرار
for Algeria, the Arab member of the Security Council, for putting forward the draft resolution. We are grateful for all those who voted in favor of the draft resolution.
المزيد من الإحباط وخيبة الأمل إزاء استمرار عرقلة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية لمساعي وقف إطلاق النار عبر اضطلاع الجهاز الرئيسي المنوط به حفظ السلم والأمن الدوليين بواجباته. سادة الأعضاء، أين يقف هذا التصويت الأمريكي إزاء المعاناة الإنسانية التي وصلت لحد الكارثة؟
Where would this U.S. vote stand in the face of the humanitarian suffering that reached the catastrophe level after the 20th of the war in Gaza? How can we call for a rules-based international order while when we call for the implementation of these rules, we are met only with deaf ears? When the Secretary General of the UN invoked Article 99 of the Charter of the United Nations,
أليس القرار صادر من محكمة العدل الدولية والذي طلب اتخاذ إجراءات محددة بكاشف الحاجة الفورية لوقف إطلاق النار؟ أليست تقارير مكتب تنسيق الشؤون الإنسانية ومنظمة الصحة العالمية والأونروا وما تعكسه بشأن كارثية الوضع الإنساني الراهن في غزة ولا سيما على الحدود مع مصر في رفح بكافية لتقنع الوفد الأمريكي بالتصويت لصالح وقف إطلاق النار بعد مرور 140 يوما على بدء النزاع وبعد أن فقد أكثر من 30,000 إنسان أغلبهم من النساء والأطفال حياتهم جراء الحرب الجائرة في غزة. سادة الأعضاء، مصر هي أول من أقام السلام مع إسرائيل من الدول العربية، ومصر هي أحرص الدول على استقرار منطقة الشرق الأوسط. وبينما يتواصل إخفاق المجلس الأمن في إيقاف الحرب، ستستمر مصر في تحمل العبء الأكبر سياسيا وأمنيا وإنسانيا جراء ولكنها ملتزمة بالعمل المضني والمتواصل على كافة الأصعدة لإيقاف نزيف الدماء لإيقاف الحرب المدمرة لاستعادة الأفق السياسي لتحقيق آمال الشعبين الفلسطيني والإسرائيلي في الأمن والاستقرار وفقا لقرارات الشرعية الدولية وإنشاء الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة على خطوط الرابع من يونيو 1967 وعاصمتها. سيدة الرئيسة، مصر تتفاوض وتتوسط بمنتهى الجدية بالتنسيق مع كل من الولايات المتحدة وقطر وإسرائيل والجانب الفلسطيني بسرعة إطلاق المحتجزين والرهائن والأسرى الفلسطينيين وسرعة دفع المساعدات الإنسانية بأقصى سرعة وبأكبر قدر ممكن لإنهاء الوضع الإنساني الكارثي في غزة لإنقاذ الأشقاء الفلسطينيين من الحصار الجائر المفروض عليهم من سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي والتصدي لكافة المحاولات الإسرائيلية لفرض التهجير القسري للشعب الفلسطيني بهدف تصفية قضيته النبيلة. تناشد مصر مجلس الأمن وكل القوى الدولية المسؤولة إنقاذ خيار السلام عبر الإنفاذ الفوري لوقف إطلاق النار. هذا لن يعرقل جهود الوساطة الجارية بل سيتيح لها الظروف المناسبة لتنجح. دعونا نتفاوض ونتوسط وسط انسياب المساعدات الإنسانية واستعادة الهدوء وتضميد جراح المصابين خاصة الأطفال اليتامى والنساء الثكلى بدلا من أن نتفاوض وسط الدمار والخراب الذي تخلفه آلة الحرب الإسرائيلية المدمرة. سيد الرئيس، سادة الأعضاء، نداء مصر لكم جميعا واضح وبسيط: أوقفوا إطلاق النار الآن. ceasefire now. وأرجو ألا يخطئ أي طرف مجددا إدراك هذه الرسالة النبيلة والمباشرة والتي لا تهدف سوى لحماية المدنيين دون حسابات سياسية. وتحذر مصر مجددا من المخاطر الكارثية المحدقة بالأشقاء الفلسطينيين جراء الخطط الإسرائيلية المعلنة لاقتحام مدينة رفح. كما تحذر مصر من استمرار تدهور الوضع الإقليمي جراء استمرار هذه الحرب المدمرة. وشكرا.
Of the consequences of this destructive war.
I thank the representative of Egypt for his statement. The representative of China has asked for the floor to make a further statement, and I now give them the floor.
Thank you, Madam President.
刚才以色列代表对中国代表团提出了一个问题，我们要回答你的是，每一个生命都是宝贵的，都有权利得到保护。关于你提到以色列公民诺亚被扣押，他的母亲曾经是中国公民。前不久，我们的外交官在纽约根据以色列常驻团的要求，会见了诺亚的朋友，跟诺亚的亲友家属一样，我们希望他早日回家。事实上，中国一直呼吁所有被扣押人员早日得到释放。为此，我们希望以色列在埃及、卡塔尔等斡旋下，跟哈马斯进行的谈判能够取得进展。同时，就像我们多次强调的，集体惩罚巴勒斯坦平民绝对不是正确的回应。事实表明，只会适得其反。实现巴以和平的唯一出路是落实两国方案。当前形势下，避免更大灾难的义务，当务之急是一体同我。我们希望以色列聆听国际社会压倒性的呼声，在认真听取安理会成员和其他成员发言后，做出正确的判断，而不是转移话题。
You should make the correct judgment rather than changing the subject.
Thank you. For his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
is important that we find a solution that will stop the killing and deaths and suffering of the Palestinian people, and that's why we're on the ground 24/7. No one else is putting their people out there. No one else is putting skin and boots on the ground to find a solution to this situation, and we'll keep working on that every single day.
Hi, Ambassador. China described your position that the Algerian draft would undermine regional efforts at the hostage deal as completely untenable given the situation on the ground. Explain then, Ambassador, how the Algerian draft would have placed those talks in jeopardy, given that the Algerian text also called for the immediate release of those hostages.
Yes, but they also call for an immediate ceasefire, which would give Hamas the cover of not releasing the hostage. Part of the ceasefire that we're working on requires that they do exactly that, and this resolution did not make that connection. And it was our concern that it would send the wrong message to Hamas, that this resolution, which actually gives them something that they have asked for without requiring them to do something in return, would have meant that the fighting would have continued. Because without the hostage releases, we know that the fighting is going to continue. Thank you all.
أنا طويل فنكون وراك.
انت احنا طوال انت
خلي يبدا رياض.
لا تفضل انت الرئيس. شرف.
خش
كلام عربي ولا انجليزي؟
يعني نسوي انجليزي اول شيء.
يلا. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We found, regrettably, we found ourselves once again with the Security Council incapable of shouldering its responsibilities and its duties in adopting a resolution that calls for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire given the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza. The Arab group will continue its efforts with the international community at all the levels to establish this humanitarian ceasefire. And I'll let my colleague, Dr. Riyad, to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. I just want to begin by expressing our gratitude to all of my brothers and sisters of the Arab group, demonstrating, as usual, our total unity in calling for an immediate ceasefire. And also, I want to express our gratitude to my brother from Algeria and his team, and to the Algerian people and their government, who represented us in an impeccable way in the Security Council. And they gave all the necessary time to all members of the Security Council over the course of the last 3 weeks to sincerely and genuinely try to reach an agreement after 140 days to have an immediate ceasefire to save lives and to save the looming catastrophe above our heads in Rafah, in which approximately 1.5 million Palestinians are cramped in that small area to try to save their lives and to stop the Israeli occupying forces from invading Rafah. Regrettably, we are extremely disappointed that a resolution was not adopted in spite of the fact that there was very strong support by 13.5, you can say close to 14 members of the Security Council to that call. And we thought that this massive support in the Council, outside the Council, in the General Assembly, in the Summit of NAM, in the Summit of the Arab countries and the Islamic countries, and in the Summit of the African Union just a few days ago, in which everyone is saying ceasefire, ceasefire now. Even high school students in the city of New York who decided last week to march in the streets out of their schools demanding a ceasefire now, and millions in all corners of the globe. Unfortunately, one country does not see it that way. And if that country has the power to say, as it was announced in the Council, that they want to have a long cessation of hostilities to be able to negotiate what they are negotiating with two of our countries, Egypt and Qatar, the release of prisoners and the hostages, who is stopping them from demonstrating to us through action of stopping the fighting, and then to continue to negotiate whether the Security Council adopt a resolution or not, although it is the charter responsibility of the Security Council, whenever there is conflict, whenever there is war, that the first thing that they should ask for is a ceasefire. Let me also say a few things in Arabic. أنا وصلت البارح مساء منتصف الليل قادما من محكمة العدل الدولية، حيث قدمنا مرافعة دولة فلسطين عبر أكثر من 3 ساعات تحدث فيها 5 من أفضل المحامين في العالم ووزير الخارجية، وأنا شخصيا كان لي شرف أن أتكلم في النهاية لبضعة دقائق لأنقل عذابات وأحاسيس وألم وجرح الشعب الفلسطيني أمام أعلى محكمة في العالم، طالبين الإنصاف والعدالة ووضع حد لمحنة الشعب الفلسطيني وإنجاز حقوقه كاملة. وبطبيعة الحال لأنه حدد في مجلس الأمن أن التصويت سيتم صباح هذا اليوم، فبدلا من أن أمكث وقتا أكثر لأسمع إلى مرافعات الآخرين، عدت إلى نيويورك في الموقع الطبيعي لي مع أشقائي وشقيقاتي المجموعة العربية في مجلس الأمن، الذين أبدعوا في طرح الموقف العربي الجماعي اليوم وبمنتهى الألم وبمنتهى الخطورة، كما عبر عن ذلك شقيقي أسامة من مصر المحاذية لقطاع غزة ولفلسطين جغرافيا وسياسة ووجدانا وقلبا. ونحييهم على ذلك. والكلمات القوية التي قالها أخي عمار باسم الجزائر التي تعبر عن عمق مشاعرنا نحن في فلسطين ونقدرها ونشكرهم على ذلك، وكذلك تعبر عن مشاعر وأحاسيس جميع العرب جميعا، وكذلك كلمتنا المشتركة التي ألقاها أخي طارق رئيس المجموعة من تونس، وأختي عالية التي طرحت باسم مجموعة منظمة مجلس التعاون الخليجي. كل ذلك يعني أبرز بشكل لا لبس فيه أنه ليس فقط عندنا إجماعا عربيا قويا حول هذه المسائل وقف إطلاق النار، ولكن الشبه إجماع دولي حول هذه المسألة. وقبل أن تسألوني ما هي الخطوة القادمة، نحن ندرس كل الخطوات ولن نترك مجالا لا لمجلس الأمن ولا للجمعية العامة ولا محكمة العدل الدولية ولا مجلس حقوق الإنسان الذي سيبدأ بعد بضعة أيام. سنبقى نطرق كل الأبواب ومع الملايين في الشوارع في كل مكان في العالم من أجل أن يتوقف هذا العدوان وأن لا يتم مذبحة ونكبة رفح ونكبة أهلنا في غزة، ونتفادى ذلك عبر موقف واضح ورسمي من مجلس الأمن باعتماد ليس فقط قرار لوقف العدوان وإنما تنفيذ وقف العدوان فورا. نشكركم على تواجدكم، أنتم يعني لسان حالنا في أن تعبروا عن هذه المأساة وعن هذا الإخفاق في مجلس الأمن. انقلوه بأمانة ودقة إلى كل أنحاء العالم، لأن نريد من العالم أن يزيد من ضغطه للتوصل إلى وقف إطلاق النار. وشكرا. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Can I ask you about, you heard the US ambassador raise it in the meeting, she has a new draft resolution. It does not have the words immediate ceasefire, but it does use the word ceasefire for the first time, and there is one part of that resolution that says the Rafah offensive should not proceed. What is your view of that resolution, and are there parts of it that you can work with?
I think that you should ask her, because it seems to me that you are slightly unclear about exactly what she means. She is more qualified than me to say that. We welcome using ceasefire. She said that to us in closed meeting, call it whatever you want, pauses, ceasefire. She said that to us in closed meeting. It was good that it was said, but more importantly, if they believe in that, who is stopping them from implementing that and influencing Israel to do so? Talal.
معالي السفير، ندرك أنكم ستتجهون إلى جميع المحافل الدبلوماسية بحثا عن الحل، ليس فقط من خلال مجلس الأمن، ولكن هل الطريق أغلق الآن من خلال المجلس بسبب التعنت الأمريكي والوقوف بصورة غير محايدة تماما ومنحازة إلى جانب إسرائيل وإصرارهم أنه لا وقف لإطلاق النار حتى التوصل إلى اتفاق حول إطلاق سراح جميع الرهائن؟ وبالنسبة لقطر ومصر إذا أمكن، هل هناك مؤشرات الآن بوجود قادة حماس في القاهرة إلى ربما انفتاح انفراج في الملف؟ أترك ذلك لكم.
باختصار، بالنسبة لنا نحن والجزائر وكل الذين يتحدثوا من العرب لن نقبل أن باب مجلس الأمن قد أغلق. سنبقى نطرق هذا الباب إلى أن يتحمل مجلس الأمن مسؤوليته وأن يتحملها بأسرع وقت ممكن لإيقاف وقف إطلاق النار.
أخ طلال، بالنسبة لسؤالك موقف المجموعة العربية إزاء انسداد الأفق أو الطريق في مجلس الأمن، نحن كما أشرت في بداية هذا اللقاء المجموعة العربية لن تتوقف طبعا، وسيكون مجلس الأمن هو الخطوة القادمة في مناسبات متتالية، لأننا نصر على تحميل مجلس الأمن لمسؤوليته التي يقرها الميثاق الأمم المتحدة والقانون الدولي. ولكن نحن ندرك أنه كل ما فات الوقت هناك أرواح تزهق، وهناك كارثة تنذر بتعميق معاناة أكثر من 1.5 مليون في رفح. سنتحرك على جميع المستويات وفي جميع المحافل، ولكن سيكون مجلس الأمن دائما نصب أعيننا، لأنها مسؤوليته التاريخية والقانونية والأخلاقية أيضا.
شكرا أخي طلال. طبعا سؤالك حول المفاوضات الجارية في العواصم، كما تعلمون يعني الجهود اللي تبذلها دولة قطر بالتعاون مع الأشقاء في مصر وبالتعاون مع الولايات المتحدة لم تتوقف، فهي مستمرة للوصول إلى اتفاق لهدنة إنسانية جديدة تسمح بالدرجة الأولى طبعا هي لحقن دماء أشقائنا الفلسطينيين، إطلاق سراح الأسرى المحتجزين في القطاع، وكذلك المحتجزين الفلسطينيين، لأن كما تذكرون الاتفاق الأول احتوى على ذلك وحققنا نجاح كبير فيه. لذا الجهود لا زالت مستمرة، وبالفعل هذه الأيام أيام دقيقة ومهمة للتوصل لاتفاق. سوف نبذل كل ما بوسعنا، يعني الجهود مستمرة. كنا نتمنى اليوم المجلس يتخذ قرار يدفع باتجاه ضغط أكبر على الطرف الإسرائيلي أيضا مما يساعد المفاوضات الجارية. فإحنا ننظر للتحرك في المجلس كدافع للتحرك كذلك في العواصم للتوصل لاتفاق لهدنة إنسانية جديدة. شكرا.
أسامة.
نفس الكلمات، ليس لدي الكثير لأضيفه على ما تفضلت به أختي العزيزة السفيرة علياء. مصر وقطر ملتزمتان وجدتان للغاية في التعامل مع تلك المفاوضات الشائكة. تلك المفاوضات بطبيعتها معقدة ولا يمكن التنبؤ بسرعة تحقيق النتائج، إنما ما نؤكده أن الجهد والعزم أكيد من كل الأطراف في محاولة لتحقيق الاختراق المطلوب، إيقاف نزيف الدماء. وكما تفضلت أختي العزيزة السفيرة علياء، لا انفصال بين قيام مجلس الأمن تحمل واجباته ووقف إطلاق النار، بل على العكس نفضل كما أوضحت في بياننا أن نتفاوض وسط الهدوء، وسط انسياب المساعدات، وسط علاج الجرحى، بدلا من أن نتفاوض تحت الضغط الشديد الذي قد ينذر بالمزيد من تصعيب المفاوضات الصعبة بطبيعتها. وبإذن الله مستمرون.
Edith.
Thank you very much. Does the Arab group have any plans to take this resolution to the General Assembly for a vote there?
Oh, this is what I meant, that you will be asking that question, and I'm glad that you're asking that question. We have all the options available to us. The resumed emergency session is one serious option. We will decide when to do it, and even if the same language or different language. And also, we are contemplating also the possibility of seeing the representative that casted the veto to address and to defend itself before the General Assembly, which is an automatic thing that could take place within 10 days. All these options are available to us. We will continue meeting as an Arab group and other friends, and we will discuss all these options, and we will decide on the step that we will begin with, but we will not relent until we succeed in having a ceasefire.
So does that mean that we can expect some sooner rather than later action by the Arab group in the General Assembly?
That it's a good assumption, and I think that most likely we will be acting on the basis of your assessment. Let me also add that we in the Arab group, strong defenders of the Secretary General and his principal position in calling for human rights, human ceasefire early in the ball game, and also we salute him for his courage in invoking Article 99 when he came to the Security Council. And also we are defenders of all UN agencies working in the humanitarian field, that they are carrying honorably their mandate, and all of the lies that you heard from one speaker in the chamber are lies and reflecting noise in his head, are not reflecting reality, which is being admired by the entire international community. And such audacity of challenging the Security Council, that he is going to implement 1701, and he is the lover of Security Council Resolution 1701, when he is refusing and attacking every Security Council resolution related to what Israel should do, is beyond the theater of absurd, and you should expose such arrogance and, listening to the noise in his head and not listening to the international community and all members of the Security Council when they say what they said. I think that that is worth noting, and it is up to you whether you want to reflect it in your reporting. Although I'm not advising you to waste too much time in that point, but I trust your judgment. Thank you so much.
Asking something off the record, if that's all right.
I forgot my phone and my glasses.
Hello, Jean.
Every time I leave early, I'm going to a Pentagon.
Yes, me too. What's new, Alex? How are you? Still thankful. You had a something? I did have a really good major eye surgery. Waiting for a new body, so I didn't have to get to this. Dustin here. How are you? I'm thankful. Yeah?
I checked your text message, but I know that I need to do this so I can answer. Everything all right? You are recovering? Good?
Yeah, I'm still recovering. Yeah.
Good. Yes.
You good enough for now? Seen my flu interview already.
Okay.
first two rows. Let me find out which one I'm supposed to.
Space issues for our State Department Correspondence Association. The first two rows are devoted to them. So I'm going to have to ask the rest of you to move back, okay? Thanks. Jenny, Alex, I'm going to have to ask you guys if you could move back. Thanks.
the new year.